Just yesterday, Komi-san or Komi-san Can't Communicate had its English dub drop on the platform it has already been available on since October 2021. While I haven't finished my viewing of Komi-san as I was watching it together with a friend originally, this is just a short critique and impression of the English dub. While I have other things to say about the series and the mindset of English dubbing and anime in general, I'd rather save that for their own videos and keep this one focused. While the English voices of Komi-san Can't Communicate are okay to fine based upon sampling the first 2 episodes, there was one decision in the dub's direction that really hinders the power of some of the scenes that worked so well in the original Japanese audio and direction, and that decision is the narration. At certain instances within the original Japanese audio, there will be moments where there is a third-person narrator, such as when the audience is first introduced to Ethan Private High School, and sometimes there will be narration by Tadano. Of course, the English version retains these sequences. However, the problem arises in the addition to new original lines of narration and dialogue featured within the English audio. The placement of these new lines are at instances where there is Japanese text on screen, such as when Komi writes her name on the board in front of the entire class,
Shoko Komi.
or when Tadano has a compass shot at him from behind by the class ninja.
Oh, you dropped your eraser.
Now he's a target.
In the instance where Tadano is a target and the audience can be just as shocked by it as he is when it occurs, the narrator doesn't need to step in so they can directly tell the audience what's going on. While the narrator does step in for some jokes within the original Japanese audio, like during the Dragon Quest style jokes that appear, the Japanese audio didn't do it for both instances, just one of them. Although I don't necessarily have a problem with it being done in English, I think that it would be better delivered along with the rest of the English audio's narration if the narrator instead had a more confident voice rather than a voice that sounds like they're constantly needing to explain something or as if they're conducting the grade school pacer test. However, despite that, my biggest point of contention arises from the most integral scene of not only the first episode, but the motivation for the rest of the series, the chalkboard scene. If you've read the manga or watched the scene, you know that this is the true beginning of the series, where Tadano and Komi have their first full interaction, where Komi communicates her struggle with talking to people and what she longs for by writing on the chalkboard for Tadano and the audience to read. Not only is this an important scene within the manga, but it is a beautiful scene within the anime that is directed incredibly well. Going from the step that Tadano takes to communicate with Komi on her own level, to the more eased out pacing to emphasize that she's getting to a point of comfort with finally being able to communicate with another person, leading to the panning out of the camera that reveals the chalkboard flooded with their writing and the connection that's been made between the two, all the way to the final words said between the two before the opening plays, that Komi's goal is to make 100 friends and that Tadano will help in her goal by also being her first. What makes this scene so impactful is not just the communication that finally happens between Komi and Tadano, but the silence, the lack of spoken dialogue between them as the music, the incredibly beautiful music by Yukari Hashimoto, follows each beat of the scene in order to further heighten the significance of the entire interaction, all leading to the break at the end of the conversation and music where a now overwhelmed but happy Komi sharply turns away, creating a noticeable burst of wind as she leaves the classroom. Rather than retain the same composition of that entire scene, but with English audio, instead of letting Tadano quietly read Komi's words to himself in the same way that the audience would have or could have quietly read the English subtitles to themselves when watching the anime with its original Japanese audio, Tadano speaks.
How did you know I can't talk to people? Well,
Not outwardly, but the English audio is directed so that we hear Tadano read Komi's writing in his head. Not only is the audience made to hear Tadano read out Komi's writing, which makes it kind of sound like he's talking to himself, but there is new dialogue added at the placement of the big chalkboard reveal, with Tadano talking about how this is the first time that they've had a conversation, stating how he learned some of her thoughts from the previous smaller interactions that happened earlier within the episode, and how she likes cats.
That was how our first conversation started. I told her I was worried watching her cry.
This wasn't needed, and I don't think it should have been added. Not only does this create another instance where the narration directly tells the audience what's being shown and what could have been inferred, but this also does symbolic damage in having Tadano serve as Komi's voice rather than her written words being enough. In addition, the emphasis the entire scene was given thanks to the music is instead broken through with focus on Tadano's speech, which then also takes away from the more important sudden break that comes when Komi flees the scene. My assumed reason for this unfortunate change has to do with the lack of English translation for the Japanese text that appears on screen. When watching the sub, such subtitles of the text are made present. However, if the person isn't watching with subtitles on, well then how would they understand without someone telling them? Well, the route that some anime that air on TV or fan subbers take is to either replace the text with its English translation or to add in a translator's note or subtitles meant specifically for that instance. However, what about music? At the beginning of the first episode, a child sings a song in Japanese, and this is retained within the English version. Potentially, this could be the case because they couldn't translate it well into English, or it couldn't fit within the space it needed. Either way, the problem that then occurs is that if a character is going to sing in Japanese and the viewer has decided to watch their anime dubbed and without subtitles, how do you expect them to know what the song means? What you should then do is force in subtitles so that the viewer can follow along rather than be left confused. Rather than break the original composition of the scene, allow the reader to follow along with subtitles so that they can read Komi's words to themselves, in the same way that Tadano originally did. Aside from that, Tadano's voice is okay. At some points where he has to project his voice or be loud, he sounds out of place and doesn't really fit the more panicked instances. However, I do think his voice flowed really well in episode 2 when talking to Osana. Osana's voice is also okay. While I do think their voice is really good, I think a bit of the fault comes in the pacing of their lines. It sounds a bit spaced out, as if they're about to explain something. Also, the way the two pronounce each other's name on the first introduction felt very poor, stating it syllable by syllable as if they weren't sure how to say it.
Osana do for you? Tadano.
Oh, this is Najimi Osana.
Yay!
Both of us.
School. I mean, that's what
You were a guy in junior high. At least you were wearing the guy's uniform like I was, weren't you?
Huh? What are you talking about, Tadano?
Finally, Komi-san. I'm not a fan of her voice at all. Rather than having a soft or quiet voice able to play with the performance of being shy, Komi instead has a very confident sounding voice, which runs in contrast to the shy and anxious demeanor she's meant to have.
I can't speak in front of everyone anymore.
I did like the German dub though.